Hey, this is Chris Hale, CEO of VIQTORY. I welcome you and joining me as we sit down for a few minutes with our nation's 12th Secretary of the Veterans Affairs, the Honorable Doug Collins. Secretary Collins is one of our own, a veteran of 2 service branches who continues that service today. Served as a Navy chaplain for 2 years in the 80s and answered the call to duty after 9/11. Colonel Collins, currently serving as a chaplain in the Air Force Reserve, has a post he has held since 2002, including a deployment to Iraq in 2008. A native of and a resident of Gainesville, Georgia, where he lives with his wife and 3 children, confirmed by the Senate 100 days ago.
Yes.
With bipartisan support, 77 to 23. Secretary Collins, we thank you immensely for taking time out of your very busy schedule to join us today.
Pretty glad to be here.
Listen, people don't understand, I think, the size of the VA. 470,000 employees, 9.1 million customers.
Yeah.
If this were a civilian organization, you'd be the 7th largest employer in the United States, somewhere between, I think, Home Depot and UPS. And the 2nd largest hospital in the network in the country. Mm-hmm. So in your first 100 days in office, what have you, just a very robust travel schedule, how has that changed what you wanted to do coming in and what you want to do now?
Well, I think, and I appreciate it, it's been a joy for the 100 days. It's been a lot of work. We've enjoyed it a great deal. But I think it also looking at it, reconfirmed a lot of what I already knew and made me actually more motivated to make the changes that we need to make. I mean, when you look at an organization your size, I like to describe it, and I appreciate the description side. For military folks out there, let's just say this: I'm bigger than active duty Army. And that's saying, you think about that, it's a large, I'm about 20,000 bigger than the active duty armor. But I think one of the things that we've found is an organization this size and the 9 million, which is, by the way, stayed steady for about 10 years, there's a tendency in government. I served in Congress for 8 years, so I know this tendency is to, if you need a problem solved, you put money and people at it. And I think one of the things in my traveling around and also just overseeing here for the first 100 days is realizing sometimes it's more of a not a money or a people issue. It's more of are we doing it right? Are we doing it the proper way? Are we asking why? And sometimes, like I said, in a great organization like this, it's always good to say, why are we doing things? And I think that's been, for me, is shown that there's things that we can continue to do better, and then there's some things that we maybe need to change.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll get to some of the metrics as well, but I want to start with culture. You've had a chance to be very hands-on with a lot of your employees, a lot of veterans that are out in the field, a lot of patients. Leaders understand everything starts with culture.
Yep.
That defines everything. Where do you assess the culture of the VA right now, and kind of where do you want to take it?
It's changing. Culture is always the end of the tube. And sometimes we come into a culture that is, especially as I did, came into a culture that had been experienced for many years. I think there's a twofold issue here. I think one, there's a culture at the VA that had been used to being complained about, used to being the example made of. Whether it be Congress, VSOs, or others, they would say, well, here's a problem at the VA's broken, the VA's bad. So that does tend to give you an insulated approach. Well, everybody thinks that something's going wrong, and so you become internalized to say, look, we're okay, we're doing this so that we don't have to answer. What I've tried to change in these first 100 days is from the top down and say, no longer is the VA a whipping post for anybody. We're going to be the premier agency that gives veterans health care. We're the only one that's tasked to do that, and we're going to do that very well. Number 2, we're not going to scare people. We're not going to scare veterans, and we're not going to scare employees over change. Change is the most difficult thing in any organization. But when you're not seeing the results that you need, I want our people to be proud to be in the VA. I want them to know that they have a secretary that backs them up. But was willing also to have the hard conversations about, are we putting the proper resources and money and people at the right areas? So I think culture comes with an expansion. I make a comment all the time, and I tell our folks, nobody will get fired at the VA for trying something. In fact, I want you to try. If you fail, fine. And, well, I'll pick you up and put you back on the path again. We've got to get it back into that culture where we're okay to try new things.
Absolutely. So here at GI Jobs and Vetrepreneur, we often say that veterans are the last nonpartisan issue left in America. And in watching your Senate testimony from last Tuesday, I have to say that I definitely got the sense that is the case, but there are vast differences in how we go about doing that, as evidence there. You said in that testimony, I'm interested in making things better for veterans, not protecting a department's broken bureaucracy. The VA is not a federal jobs program. It's an organization whose sole purpose is to serve veterans. Poor focus is now on the veteran, not the VA itself. I think as taxpayers ourselves, veterans are very interested and reducing cost and increasing productivity. How do you do that while also maintaining the level of service?
Well, I think there's a disconnect on what does it actually mean because again, when you always hear that money and people are solving your problem, then there's no understanding of, well, maybe that's not the right answer. And I'm going to go into those statistics.
Right.
We've added we've had over $100 billion to the budget. We've had literally thousands, tens of thousands of employees, but yet our VA metrics of healthcare wait times, mental health wait times, all have gone in the wrong direction. In fact, they've increased over the past few years. Our VBA backlog, which is what a lot of our veterans' first introduction to the VA is that disability claim. Our backlog was at 260,000 when I came in 100 days ago. I'm pleased to report that we just broke under 200,000. We're at 22% just in 100 days. But it's a refocusing and saying, look, why do we have people in the places we do? And it's not just simply, and this is the thing I've been having to fight for the whole 100 days is this misconception that this is a random approach and looking at it. But when you look at an organization the size that we are, and you have it spread out to where you have payroll being done in 60 separate areas plus the centralized payroll, why are we doing that? Why are we doing HR? Why are we doing contracting? You may have heard this before. You ever heard the old saying, if you've been to one VA, you've been to them all?
Sure.
That's the biggest lie around. You've been to one VA, you've been to one VA. And we've got to get it back to where VA is a standard brand.
Common brand.
And so that's what I'm looking for.
Yeah, absolutely. We asked our readership for questions. One of them, they asked, would you be willing to trade your current private health care for you and your family for VA health care?
I mean, sure. I mean, I think that our healthcare is a good thing. I've been under state healthcare with my teacher wife for all of her until she retired. But I'm not going to. One of the things I've committed to, even though I have earned benefits and stuff, I'm not going to participate in the system right now because I don't want any perception of me being secretary to get anything that anybody else wouldn't get.
Yes, sir.
But I'm proud of our healthcare system. I'm proud of what we're doing. Does that mean that everything's perfect? No. It means that we can do better. And I think any organization that doesn't think it can get better is dying.
Absolutely, absolutely. I know that you're interested in making more veterans aware of a lot of the services that are available to them that they've earned. What groups of veterans do you feel like are most at risk, and how do you intend to reach them?
It's the transition group. It's really our biggest, and that just then it leads into years later. I made the comment yesterday in one of the hearings in the House that I didn't realize that even from my service, I'm a reservist, been a reservist the whole time, but from my active duty time that I had benefits in education and stuff that I didn't know about until I actually, another officer said, hey, well, why are you doing this? You can do this. I did it with my kids.
Yeah.
I didn't know it. And I was in the middle of, this was a number of years ago, and I didn't know about this. So I think what we've got to look at is the transition program. You're going to, just a little preview. We know that DOD and VA, I call us twins, we're fraternal twins. But unfortunately, we've not worked together really well. We've been almost sibling rivalries for some reason. That's changing under this administration. The Secretary of Defense and myself are friends. We know each other. We've known each other before we came into these offices. And we see that transition is our big issue. So I would just say, stay tuned. There's going to be some stuff that we understand. He owns the program of transition, but I get blamed for the program of transition. So we're going to make some work here that we can fix that a little bit.
That handoff point is really critical.
Warm handoffs.
Absolutely, that's fantastic. Some of our readers asked about a lot of very specific policy things, 50% threshold for VA disability rating, et cetera, et cetera. Can you describe some of the authority that you've got and some of the authority that you don't have in order to change some of these policy items?
That's a great question because I'm hearing it here internally. One of the questions, because I asked why, I sound like a young, I reverted back to a younger child, saying, I asked why are we doing this? Why are we doing that?
Right.
Because what I was amazed though is sometimes we don't have an answer. They'll give it the old parenting answer. Well, because I said so. Well, no, that's not good enough for me. So I think what we have to do is break it down into two areas. Regulation and policy is what we do. That's when I can take a pen and I can work with our organization and say, no, the way we're implementing this from our policy standpoint or regulation standpoint has got to change. Now, when we bump up against statute, that's when I have to go to Congress and say, I can't go any further past the law. And I think that's one of the areas that is difficult because the default of an organization of any size like ours is, well, it's the law. I hear this so many times.
Right.
Well, sir, that's just the law. And I said, well, show me the statute. I mean, I've been in Congress. I'm an attorney. Show me the statute. Crickets.
Right.
And they said, well, it's just the law. I said, no, show me the statute. So that's where the reader needs to understand and listener needs to understand that the difference is if it's policy and regulation that we've generated, we can change. statute, I have to go back to Congress to actually change.
Absolutely, absolutely. And it sounds like you're going to do as much as you can.
Oh, you better believe
outside
it.
of that.
You better believe it.
Absolutely. So, listen, after your tenure as VA Secretary is up, whenever that is, hopefully 4 years from now, and veterans are talking amongst themselves about your tenure as VA Secretary, what do you want that legacy to be?
I want to say he made a difference. He did what he said.
Absolutely, absolutely. We've got just a couple other questions, if you wouldn't mind. So our company advocates for creating civilian opportunity for veterans based on the fact that they're better off for their service, that military service, DOD, right? Leadership and discipline and all the stuff that we learned in military service made us better. Do you believe that veterans are better off for that service? And can you give us some examples?
Oh, yeah, I definitely do. I think it's the discipline. It's the understanding of I call it military bearing. And now, does everybody take that and leave? No. Okay. But I think there's something internal for most, and this is what we see in transition, not in the just jobs, but in life in general, is when they leave the military, especially even on short term, they've had a sense of getting up, doing a job, being on time, doing that work. I think it's just such important skills that employers can lean upon. Also, hopefully they're going to come with a sense of ownership, that if I do it, I'm on it. It's not me, because you come from a squadron background in the Air Force, you come from a Marine background in a platoon or Army. You don't get up and say, well, Jim didn't do his job.
That's right.
Well, that's a good way to get the entire group in. So now I think it's an ownership issue that gives an employer the sense of, hey, I can give them a job, they're going to do the job, we can correct them if they're not doing it right, but they're going to get it to the point where they need to.
Yeah, absolutely. We do a lot of work in helping veterans get into businesses. They're overrepresented in business ownership. They're willing to take on that risk, and it's just great stuff. So we're here about a week out from Memorial Day weekend.
Yes.
So what would the VA Secretary to say is the best way to honor veterans on Memorial Day weekend?
Remember that no matter what you do in your own personal time, remember that the reason for this holiday is those who gave their life that did not come home. Remember the families that right now are having empty places at their table, many for decades right now, that have had that missing place since Vietnam. They've had that missing place since World War II. They've had that missing place since Korea or any other conflict, and even our GWOC generation in Desert Storm. For them, Memorial Day was about sending a loved one who committed themselves to this country and did not come home. I want to be very solemn in this. This is not a Veterans Day. I've been this for years.
Right.
We'll celebrate that in November. This one is about those who gave a special sacrifice. And I would just say remember those, because those are the folks that need our attention and help. One of the things we've actually done right here before Memorial Day is we've moved the survivor benefit program back into the office of the Secretary. It's no longer in a bureaucratic office somewhere else. We're making sure that those survivors have the white glove treatment that they deserve to get what they need. And sometimes that's been difficult. And so I've heard the complaints, I've heard the issues, and I've said, look, we're just going to bring this back in. They deserve an answer, good or bad. They deserve an answer, and they deserve it in a professional way, and that's what we're doing.
Outstanding. Sir, thank you so much. I think we rest assured veterans are in good hands with your leadership, and we appreciate everything you do.
Appreciate it. Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Right.